Good morning, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone present here today and those following the proceedings through the live broadcasting on MBC One and other NBC digital platforms. I would like to acknowledge the present members of the selection committee, Mr. Esther Kapanda, the Secretary to the National Assembly, and the Secretary of the Selection Committee, members of the Secretariat, members of the media, members of the public following these interviews, either in person or online, and ladies and gentlemen. Today, the date is the 3rd of June, 2026, and the time is 10:26. We are gathered here today in terms of Section 610 of the Electoral Commission Electoral Act number 5 of 2014 for the purpose of interviewing candidates for appointment as members of the Electoral Commission of Namibia. My name is Lidvina Shapwa, and I represent the Public Service Commission, and I have the honor to share this interview today. Serving alongside with me on the selection committee are Mr. Willem van Groenen, the Chairperson of the Council of Law Society of Namibia, and the Deputy Chairperson of the selection committee. Followed by Ms. Susan Hinda, the Registrar of the High Court of Namibia, and I also have Mr. Vemunyengwa Kavari, the representative of the Public Accounts and Auditors Board, and Ms. Harmony Bierkes, Director at the Namibia Qualifications Authority. The selection committee is established in terms of Section 5.1 of the Electoral Act number 5 of 2014. And the purpose of the interview today is the responsibility that is entrusted to this committee is a very important one, and it forms part of the process of identifying suitable persons for appointment to the Electoral Commission of Namibia, which is one of the institutions that plays a vital role in safeguarding and strengthening our democratic processes. Following the public invitation for applications, 4 candidates have been shortlisted for interviews today. I am pleased to note that so far no objections were received regarding the appointment of any person as a member of the Commission amongst the shortlisted candidates. On behalf of the Selection Committee, I wish to thank all stakeholders and members of the public for their interest in this important national process. The committee is now ready to commence with interviews, and at this point, Secretary, may I kindly invite the first candidate, Ms. Julieta Divu Ferreira, to come in the boardroom. I thank you. Ms. Julieta Divu Ferreira,
yes,
please make yourself comfortable and welcome.
Thank you.
To this interview. We are a panel, we are members of the selection committee, and we are 5 of us. 6 of us. No, 5, sorry. One is the secretary, I tried to, yeah. So we just want to discuss your application as which you applied as a member to become a member of the Electoral Commission of Namibia, and we will ask you a few questions.
Okay.
So let me maybe introduce the panel to you. On my immediate right, I have Mr. Willem van Groenen, and followed by Ms. Susan Hinder. And on my left, I have, my far left, I have Mr. Kavari, and also then followed by Ms. Biegas. Those are the people who will be asking you questions. And then at the end, we have the secretary of the interview, Ms. Esther Kapanda, who is the secretary to the National Assembly. So, well, as I said, welcome. And we want to, because of time, I believe you know your colleagues are also waiting outside.
Yes.
So we want to be as brief as possible, but also we want to give you at least 45 minutes to answer the questions. If you do it in the shorter period, that will be a bonus. Thank you. Now, I'll ask you the first question, Ms. Ferreira. And can you address the committee of your knowledge and understanding of the legal framework under which the ECN operates and the statutory role of the electoral commissioners? That's A. B, in your view, what is the constitutional purpose of the Electoral Commission and what are the greatest threats to electoral legitimacy in modern democracy? Thank you. You have the floor.
Okay. Good morning, Chairperson of the committee. Good morning, members of the Commission. It's an honor to be here this morning as a candidate for this position. With regards to my knowledge on the legal framework that governs the Electoral Commission, first of all, the Electoral Commission is provided for in the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia as an independent body that is responsible to organize, direct, supervise, and manage elections in a free, fair, impartial, and independent manner. The legal frameworks, also other legal frameworks that govern the Commission are the Electoral Act 5 of 2014 that stipulates the mandate as provided for in the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia, and what the roles and responsibilities of the Commission are. In addition to that, there are also other legal frameworks that the Commission should adhere to. That is the Regional Councils Act, that also stipulates the manner in which regional council elections are conducted. And then there's also the Local Authority Act that also stipulates the manner in which local authority elections should be conducted. There are a number of threats to electoral systems today. Number one, it is obvious that the world is moving, and we are currently in the information age, and with that, technology is also advancing. The use of technology can also pose a number of threats. We can use the use of the EVMs that was first used previously in one of the elections by the Commission, where it was contested, and the court ruled that the Commission could make use of EVM for elections, however, considering that there's paper trail. But even with paper trail or records, that also comes with its own challenges, because with technology, depending on the voters, it can fail at any time. And once technology fails, especially in the process of elections, while a voter is casting their vote, there is a need for another person to come in to assist the voter or work on the specific device, and that might also question the secrecy of the person's ballot. And one other challenge could also be that if there is an error with a paper trail, once a voter casts a vote, then the receipt is printed out. That means that, and then if there's an error, another receipt needs to be printed. That will affect now when the records are compared with the information on the system. There might be a difference between the two records. Secondly, not only for our country, Namibia, it has been evident that there has been a challenge with voter turnout in our country, specifically amongst young people. For the longest, that has been a challenge. But the only way that that challenge can be addressed, it should be through identifying what the causes are. And one of the responsibilities of the Commission is research. And the only way that can be done is to conduct research and identify what the actual causes are that are leading to low voter turnout. A study that was conducted previously identified challenges such as socioeconomic challenges. And for these challenges to be addressed, it's beyond the Commission's responsibility only. It requires a multi-stakeholder approach where each and every stakeholder is responsible for an area that they can cover just to address the issues that comes with socio-economic challenges. The Commission can also do that after identifying what the actual causes are through stakeholder engagements, by identifying the role of each and every stakeholder. That's, for example, by working with training institutions that can be responsible for voter education, because one of the challenges identified is also voter education and lack of information, especially to young people in marginalized areas. And then the issue of technology. There is a digital divide gap in our country now, and then by collaborating with other stakeholders that are able to assist our citizens to reduce the gap or the digital divide gap will in turn assist in ensuring that all different stakeholders, all different groups of voters receive the necessary information that they need to be able to cast their votes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Ferreira.
Good morning.
My question to you is, the electoral commissioners are required to act independently, impartially, and without fear, favor, or prejudice. Can you describe a situation in your professional life where you were required to make a decision that was lawful and ethically correct, but which was unpopular, personally disadvantageous, or risked damaging an important relationship? How did you approach the decision, and what did you learn from this experience?
In my current role, I serve as the National Director for SOS Children's Villages Namibia. Recently, about a year ago, we went through an organizational review that led to the restructuring of our organization. That meant that we had to relook at the organizational structure and identify and ensure that the organizational structure is fit for a strategic plan, because we just completed a strategic plan, so we needed a structure that will assist in implementing the strategic objectives of the organization. So that meant looking at the previous structure and identify if the positions on the structure were relevant and would be able to implement the strategic plan. So that meant that a number of positions in the previous structure were identified as redundant. And having worked with the individuals in different roles, as you are looking at the structure and identify those positions that are no longer or would no longer be relevant to the organization, they are attached to different individuals that I've worked with for a very long period of time. But then again, during this process, I needed to be objective and also look at the mandate of the organization. It's a registered organization by the state, and the expectations of the organization from the state and from the members of the organization. And my role is also to ensure that the mandate of the organization is carried out and ensure that statutory compliance. So to be able to do that, it means that we needed positions that would be able to implement the structure. So in that way, I had to be objective and ensure that the correct decision is made for the benefit of the organization, and at the end, not only the organization, but the clients that the organization is there for, which is the children, and ensuring children's rights are adhered to. After the development of the new structure, there was a need now to communicate back to the employees, to inform the employees which positions were redundant, and obviously they knew that would in turn mean that employees knowing who is affected. And with that, we had to ensure that those that had to be laid off, they were laid off in line with the Labour Act of the Republic of Namibia, ensuring that whatever was due to the employees, according to the law, the organization had to adhere to that. And with that, what was important is that during this whole process, from the beginning, or when the organization already intended to go through the organizational review, there was continuous communication with all the relevant stakeholders, that is employees, our beneficiaries, and all other stakeholders that worked with the organization. And at the end, because of that, clear, continuous, constant communication and adhering to the legal frameworks of the country, we were able to carry out the organizational review and the restructuring process of the organization successfully.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll pose you the next two questions, but I'll separate the two questions. First posing the questions, waiting the response, and then I'll pose the second question.
Okay.
The question is, which SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections do you consider most important for Namibia? And how can the Electoral Commission better align its practices with these standards?
Can you please repeat the question?
So, which SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections do you consider most important for Namibia? And how can the Electoral Commission better align its practices with these standards?
In terms of the principle guiding elections in SADC, is ensuring that the Commission is independent and elections are carried out in a free, fair, independent, and impartial manner. For the Commission to be able to do that, because it's also provided for already, our Electoral Act is also aligned to that, and it's also provided for in the Constitution, is to make sure that it adheres to that. By doing that, as a commissioner, one of the responsibilities of the commissioner, which is the highest decision-making body of the Commission, is its fiduciary, strategic, and responsibilities. That is to ensure that when the strategic plan of the organization is developed, that is in line with those principles. And with that, ensuring that strategic objectives also speak to those principles, that principles are adhered to. And for that to, for principles to be adhered to, is to ensure that one of the strategic objectives of the organization is to ensure that systems in the Commission are strengthened, including growth and development of its people, so that they are aware of these principles, the legal frameworks that govern the institutions, and all this is cascaded down so that each member of the Commission is aware of the principles, and also through post-mortem evaluations after every election to identify if there were any gaps or any principles that were not adhered to, so that they are improved in the next elections, and also continuously reviewing policies and the legal framework, that's the Act, and identify any gaps, especially through lessons learned from previous elections, to ensure that it's aligned with these principles and guidelines.
Thank you for the second question. What lessons should Namibia draw from the recent electoral observation mission reports on the conduct of the 27 November 2024 presidential and National Assembly elections? And what reforms would you prioritize to address any adverse findings or recommendations?
Okay. With the previous elections, one of the challenges that were identified were logistical challenges. And as a result, it led to the extension of the elections. And after that, the elections were contested by some of the political parties. However, since the outcome of the court was that the elections were credible, and it did not lead to nullifying the election results. So what that meant is that a lesson that the Commission can learn from the previous elections is that election process is a project. When a project is developed, you start from the initial phase of a project, that is identifying the need why this project is developed and ensuring that a concept is developed that speaks to the type of project that is being implemented, what the objectives are, including a plan. And when a project is developed, that is also already, before its implementation, identifying possible risks that might come with that, and also, once risks are identified, coming up with mitigating actions in case those risks are identified. And in projects such as elections, there is a need also for the Commission to, even before the implementation of the project, to develop contingency plans that speaks to mitigating actions in case something happens. There are already actions identified that should be implemented to address that challenge. And secondly, another thing that came out, it meant that there is a need, a lesson that the Commission learned from is that there is a need for decentralization to ensure that services are closer to the people and there are adequate polling stations. And it also took time for the extension of the elections to be announced. Maybe one reform that can be done is that when reviewing the current Electoral Act, that needs to be reviewed because several elections already passed since 2014, is to look at what amendments can be done to strengthen the electoral process or decision-making as to when to extend the elections. Or maybe currently elections are polling stations open from 7 o'clock in the morning, I think, to 2100 hours. Maybe the possibility of extending election hours, even for 24 hours, and also having the possibility of having more polling stations open.
Thank you.
Sorry, now, the next question. If appointed, what strategic reforms would you advocate over the next 5 years to strengthen the Electoral Commission's effectiveness, credibility, and resilience?
Can you please repeat the question?
If appointed, what strategic reforms would you advocate over the next 5 years to strengthen the Electoral Commission's effectiveness, credibility, and resilience?
Okay. As per the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia, the Electoral Commission is an independent body. However, its independence is not explicitly described in the Act. Currently, the Commission is treated as a public entity of the Republic of Namibia, risking, in a way, its independence. And at the moment, even when it comes with its financial oversight of its financial resources, the Commission does not have a separate bank account that it operates from. And secondly, since our very first elections, following all the other elections after that, there has been lower voter turnout, although it has been fluctuating throughout the different elections, but compared to the very first election, we've never had the same rate of voter turnout. There are a few researches have been conducted as to the reasons of voter turnout, but the Commission being one of its responsibilities being research, it should be a priority now for the Commission to carry out an extensive research, also in collaboration with other institutions, especially training institutions, to ensure that root causes, actual causes of low voter turnout are identified and come up with solutions for that. Another challenge, another reform that is critical comes with the challenge that was faced with the election results in Rundu. Local authority elections. Currently, if there is an error with the announcement of the elections or by the presiding officer, that cannot be changed until it's changed until it goes to court. That's the only time that the changes can be effective. What happened in Rundu is that once it was wrongly allocated to one of the political parties instead of the other one, and that could only be changed after a court ruling. So one of the reforms could be that the Act can give the Commission the mandate of providing oversight to the election results from the presiding officers before they actually come out, just to verify, look through the, after the presiding officer is done, just to verify that there are no errors before the results are announced, so that it doesn't take a longer period of time for it to be rectified, that is to wait until it's ruled by the court.
Thank you. The next question is from me. Ms. Ferreira, I would like to understand from your previous information shared, you touched a bit on challenges of independence of the institution, but my question is, institutional independence does not equate to operating in a vacuum. The Electoral Commission is accountable to the National Assembly, and its decisions may be subject to judicial scrutiny, as you have also referred to in your comments earlier, in the event of electoral disputes. How would you ensure that this accountability to Parliament and the courts strengthens rather than undermines the Commission's actual and perceived independence, neutrality, and non-partisanship? How would you ensure that this accountability to Parliament and the courts strengthen rather than undermine the Commission's actual perceived independence and neutrality and non-partisanship? Thank you.
Yes, although the Commission is independent, it's accountable to the National Assembly. However, to ensure that it remains independent, neutral, but accountable to those bodies, first of all is to ensure compliance with statutory legal requirements, national statutory requirements, that is the Constitution, executing its mandate and duties according to the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia and other legal frameworks like the Electoral Act, and ensure that its reports are presented for transparency as required, and elections processes are carried out in line with the different legal frameworks that guide electoral processes, and also continuous communication with different stakeholders. Continuous communication with different stakeholders, especially the key stakeholders, does not mean that its independence is taken away. It's just to ensure that the organization or the institution remains credible and neutral, that is making decisions based on evidence and also based on the rule of law, avoiding making decisions outside the law, and also based on evidence. Thank you.
The next question is from me. In your view, what would be the single greatest possible strategic threat to Namibia's electoral democracy, and what specific preventative strategies should the ECN implement to mitigate such threats, and how would you measure whether those interventions were effective?
Can you please repeat your question?
In your view, what would be the single greatest possible strategic threat to Namibia's electoral democracy? And what specific preventative strategies should the ECN implement to mitigate such threats? And how would you measure whether those interventions were effective?
Okay. Ensuring democracy of the Commission is to ensure that electoral processes are participatory, free from discrimination, and every eligible voter, that is every person that is above the age of 18 and is a Namibian citizen, is provided with the opportunity to vote and access the voting process. One of the strategic challenges that could threaten Namibia's democratic elections could be ensuring inclusive participation of eligible voters. As a nation, we have different groups of people, those that are more vulnerable compared to the other ones. That is ensuring that people living with physical disability, different forms of disability, have the opportunity and equal access to voting. That is, if there are provision for visually impaired members of our society, people living with disability, that is the type of ballots that are provided, the electoral booth, that ensuring that they are convenient. And one way to prevent that is to identify especially what this key threat is, coming up with, working with different stakeholders that can be able to come up with solutions and draw up a strategy on how to ensure inclusivity and non-discrimination when it comes to the voting process. With that, the strategy that clearly indicates the role of each different stakeholder, because this is not a challenge that can only be addressed by the ECN. That is where other bodies can come in. For example, civil society organizations, corporates, training institutions, and associations for different groups of people, let's say associations for people living with disabilities. And those actions should come with, outcomes should clearly indicate what is it that the institution is intending to achieve. with those interventions. To be able to measure whether those interventions are effective from the start, there should be a baseline that should inform what the state is at that moment, and also after the implementation of those, different initiatives, a study is done just to compare what the baseline was to the results at the end of that specific project, and identify if the Commission was able to reach those objectives. If not, but that is not only done at the end of the project, but throughout implementation, there should be provisions for monitoring, just to ensure that the identified interventions still address those needs. If not, there is a need to re-strategize, so that by the end of the implementation, those strategic objectives would have been met, or there is an impact, or that would ensure that those challenges, or this specific challenge, is addressed.
Thank you. My next question is, what lessons should the Commission draw from the operational challenges experienced during the last elections, and how would you improve preparedness for future elections?
Yes, like I mentioned earlier, one of the operational challenges were logistical challenges, where the ballots were delayed, reached late at different polling stations. Therefore, some voters not having access to the ballot papers, and which led to the elections being extended. One way that can be avoided is already, like I mentioned also earlier, once the design of the project, that is the election project, is done, possible risks are also identified with mitigating actions. In case something happens, the Commission already can activate that mitigating action to prevent that. Also ensuring that there are, the number of polling stations are increased, and also extending voter times, the number of hours that the polling stations operate, because if ballot papers reach the polling station late, at least if there is extended hours, there is still time for voters to cast their votes. Yes, and there was also misinformation, and one way that can be addressed is through continuous information sharing sessions. During the election process, the Commission should ensure that it continuously provides information to the citizens, because misinformation usually comes as a result of lack of information.
Thank you.
Can you please tell us why you think stakeholder engagement is important, strategically, what would you do to ensure it is implemented? Can I repeat?
Okay. Stakeholder involvement is important because in the electoral process, there are different key stakeholders involved. Some examples of the stakeholders are the eligible voters, the Commission, its employees, civil society organizations, the government, political parties. It is important because each stakeholder has a role to play when it comes to the elections. Each stakeholder has a responsibility when it comes to elections. Voters have the responsibility to register for elections and also cast their votes. The Electoral Commission has the responsibility to ensure that these elections are free, fair, and ensure that the results are credible, and the election process is transparent and impartial, and the political parties also in turn have their own responsibilities, that is campaign and all that, and ensuring that their nominated candidates, the lists are submitted to the Commission. So that's why stakeholder engagement is important in this process, to ensure that each stakeholder's responsibilities are executed. The way that can be done is that, first of all, it's important for the Commission to map out who the key stakeholders are for the Commission. Once those stakeholders are identified, have a strategy, a stakeholder engagement strategy that clearly indicates who the stakeholders are and how the mapping was done, and the result, and an assessment of the stakeholders that will result in a stakeholder matrix that indicates the level of importance and what their roles are. That will in turn also assist the Commission on how to work with the different stakeholders. For example, what information to provide to which stakeholders and at what level, and what are the expectations of each stakeholders are. That will also assist the Commission in coming up with a memorandum of understandings with the different stakeholders, because with memorandum of understandings, that's what clearly states what the responsibility of each and every stakeholder is, and it's signed off by the different institutions or organizations that are in partnership with the Commission as well as the Commission.
Okay. Sorry, now the second part of the question is, how would you ensure inclusivity for the youth, the women, and persons with disabilities in an electoral process?
Okay. To ensure inclusivity amongst the different citizens, number one is to ensure that different citizens are grouped with similar characteristics. We have the youth. Even the youth, there is also a need to further group different types of youth with different characteristics. That is looking at their level of education, their proximity to places where they can access education, and also how the modes of or mediums of transferring information that the different groups prefer. For example, with young people, ensuring that there are opportunities for them to participate in ways that young people prefer and that they can relate to. With young people, they are more technologically inclined, and they'd also prefer participating through the use of technology and also the different mediums in which information is transferred. With the youth, it's mostly through social media. Also ensuring that the different groups meet identifying what the preferred mediums of communication are for the different groups. And also there is the issue of accessibility, ensuring that ways are identified to ensure that different groups are identified. We find young people, women in the remote areas. How do we reach those different groups? That one way that can be done is to ensure the decentralization. Currently, the Act provides for the Commission to have offices in the 14 regions, and also in the constituencies and local authority, depending on whether the Commission sees that there is a need. But then ensuring that those offices and also up to the grassroots levels are present, it will ensure that all these groups have access to the information and for them to be able to participate. Women, there are different ways in which we can ensure that women participate by looking at gender roles. What is it that they spend most of their times doing? Identify areas where they spend most of their times having community activists that continuously, not only activists, but field workers that continuously disseminate information and allow for participation of women. Let's say it can be at markets where they spend most of their times, in their fields, or depending on the context of the region, be it at the river or while they are busy with the different their gender roles, and participation of people living with disabilities, ensuring that they access information and information is provided for in a way that they're able to access it. For example, people that are living that are visually impaired, ensuring that information or IC materials are provided for in Braille also, and also for those that with hearing disability, that there are audios that or other forms of communication that they can get for them to be able to participate in the electoral process.
Anything else from the panel? Ms. Julieta, would you want to ask any question? Sorry, I think my mic is off. Would you like to ask any question?
Not at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, on that basis, thank you very much. And I think somebody will usher you out.
Thank you.
you.
Can I take this one?
Ms. Josephine Kaunapawa Haraama,
Yes, ma'am.
welcome to this selection committee interview.
Yes.
My name is Lidvina Shapwa, and I'm the chairperson of this interview today,
All right.
and I represent the Public Service Commission. I will, in the meantime, introduce the rest of the panel to you.
Yeah.
On my immediate right is Mr. Willem van Groenen from the Law Society, and followed by Ms. Susan Hinda from the High Court of Namibia. And on my left, far left, I'll start from my far left, I have Mr. Kabari from the Board of Accountants and Auditors, and followed by Ms. Biekes, who is from NQA. On my far right, you'll see the Secretary to National Assembly, Ms. Esther Kapanda, who is the Secretary to these interviews. So you are most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Each panel will put questions to you, and you will have about 45 minutes to complete to answer all the questions.
All right.
Yes. Let me start with the first question, which has got two parts. The first part says, can you address the committee of your knowledge and understanding of the legal framework under which the ECN operates and the statutory role of the electoral commissioners? B, in your view, what is the constitutional purpose of the Electoral Commission, and what are the greatest threats to electoral legitimacy in modern democracies? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you, Madam Chair, and also a very good morning to the panel. Thank you very much for shortlisting me, and also good morning to the public. I will begin with the first question in addressing the initial act in response to that, to say that it is governed under the Act, the Electoral Act, Act number 5 of 2014, initially, and the committee and the Electoral Commission, what they need to address and their roles essentially is to ensure that there is a high level of impartiality within their statutory and constitutional mandate. That is number one. The second one is for them to ensure that the public and the nation at large goes through what we call a free and fair election process. That is the second part. The third one, and I will be coming back to all of them as we go in order for me to address why that is important in alignment to the question that is posted. The third is initially for them to ensure that within the public, the integrity of the institution is protected. Initially to say that not only should we be seen as being an ethical institution, which is the ECN, however, also making sure that the integrity of it lies thereof within the nitty-gritties and overall actions, the day-to-day actions of the ECN. We also need to ensure that there is a high level of stakeholder participation and involvement in this regard, essentially to say that when it comes to protecting the rights of the society, and also ensuring that when it comes to freedom of press, that is also addressed in a manner that is understood by both the Commission and the overall stakeholders, and in this case being the media. Essentially, the role which needs to go above and beyond that, that is already constituted, also has a lot to do with stakeholder education, educating our public and educating each and every person that is eligible for voting, for example. Firstly, to say that we want to have a communication strategy within Namibia which is based on facts and which is based on truth, for example. We want to ensure that the communication strategy within Namibia is one that is effervescent, and by effervescent I mean that the concentration of information being informed, or rather being published, needs to be the same, and it needs to be consistent at all levels. So that is the role. The purpose of the ECN, and I will touch on this again, which is the second question, Madam Chair, and also going into what the threats of the ECN are. The purpose, by and large, is initially to understand the meaning of impartiality, in a sense that when we talk about impartiality, usually it comes with a connotation of saying, because we are impartial, we are not going to talk to anybody, or we are going to stay as far as possible from everybody. No, it's the other way around. When we are talking about impartiality, we are talking about the level of transparency, the level of openness, to say that we have an open door policy when people can actually feel free to come to us and engage with us. That is the second part about impartiality. It's about accessibility, to say how accessible is the ECN to the public and to the stakeholders, for example. In a sense, to say that we want to ensure that anybody who has any interest about the ECN is able to come forth whenever they have any matters for clarification or education, even in that sense, in order for them to be provided with that information that is required from the ECN. So it's basically understanding the initial of the initial role of what impartiality means, and also understanding that element of us being independent as a commission. That is the purpose. I will now move on to the threats. There's quite a number of threats, and initially with the threats that I will begin with, it would be the voter apathy, where it needs to, where it looks at the declining proportion of young people and the nation at large coming forth to cast their votes. That is a huge threat, in a sense where the data is there, and the data is informing us that from the year of when elections, when Namibia became democratic up until 2019, the demographics have gone, the data has dropped from 97.3% to 60.7%. And this is a concern, because you want to ensure that the number of people that come out to vote are really coming out to vote with having that understanding in terms of what the importance is of voting. The second threat, which is based on the proportion that we have of the number of people that come forth to vote, is linked to perhaps the reasons why they are not coming to vote, right? And that has to do with the logistical arrangements that are set in place. Are we truly, as a commission, for example, the questions that we need to ask ourselves, right? Fostering an environment that is constituted as free for a free and fair election, for example, and we would want to go over to initially understanding the depth of it. So it is one thing to collect data, and we can really excel at data collection level, but it's another to have the right skills in order for you to interpret that data, to say, now we understand what the data is informing us, but why is the data telling us that which is telling us? And how can we further go deeper to do what we call data mining? How can we go deeper and understand what it actually means when a percentage of voter participation drops from 90 to 60%, for example? And the answer to that question is to say that the only people that would be able to tell us, or rather give us that answer, is the people who perhaps are not coming forth to vote, and for us to understand the reasons why. I do not understand why it would be a problem for us to go out there, run surveys, for example, and truly understand, because strategy needs to be based on truth. That is the first thing. When we say that we are compiling a strategic plan in order for us to understand and do better in terms of our current reality in Namibia, we need three major things. The first one, and they all need to be based on the truth. The first one is we need past data that obviously informs us about what's happening and what's the situation on the ground, what is essentially the feeling in the room in the Namibian culture. That's first. The second one is our past documents, right? Our electoral assessments and the reports thereof. And after we have these reports, we want to also ensure that we understand what the recommendations are and whether the recommendations are suitable for us to actually implement. And then the third one would be the lessons learned from previous elections, and that is the only way we will be in a position to improve future elections moving forward. So that's the other. And I would be then moving on to the third threat, which is quality research within Namibia. A lot of vast of information that we need would come from research, and even that research that we conduct needs to be based on what I've previously said, which is the truth. And when it comes to the truth, we need to run the surveys. We need to hear from the people themselves why we have low levels of voter turn-up, for example, and that is where true strategy begins. And it's particularly amongst the youth where we would want to get this data from. And we have this notion where we say that no, they won't participate. The youth will participate. In fact, the youth are not complicated people. In fact, they want to help. The only thing about the youth is that they want to feel involved. They want ECN to be able to answer the question, how does it matter then for us? They want to feel like they matter, and therefore we need to make them feel like they matter in order for us to get that data out of them, and in order for us to create strategies moving forward that are going to be aligned with the expectations of the youth in order for us to improve our processes as an ECN moving forward. That is on research. And then the fourth one, which is the second one that I would mention, is the matter on IT infrastructure within Namibia as well, to say that we need to ensure that the IT infrastructure, be it, for example, which is software, IT, or whether it's hardware IT, is it compatible in order for us to ensure that we have a free and fair election moving forward? And with our population is actually a very, the fact that we have a small population, for example, it's actually a good thing, right? To say that we are this number of people in the country, because if you look at the demographics, for example, in other larger countries, our population is a case study, our population is a pilot study. But the fact that we have the advantage of that number, it's actually easy for us to forge strategies that will help us get the numbers out of the people in order for us to have those people who are eligible for voting to come forth and cast their vote. The last one would be stakeholder engagement as a threat. In what way do we engage our stakeholders? At what point do we involve our stakeholders? A very important stakeholder, for example, is the media. Having regular sessions with the media and educating them about the act, educating them about the role, educating them about how they also report and engage with the society, because they are the bridge between ECN and what ECN has to communicate and the information that will ultimately be received by the public. So they are very important stakeholder, and how to manage them is an initially very important aspect, to say that we need to make sure that there are strategies in how we communicate with the media, and also strategies in how the media also communicates with the public.
Thank you. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. The next question is, the electoral commissioners are required to act independently, impartially, without fear, favor, or prejudice. Can you describe a situation in your professional life where you were required to make a decision that was lawful and ethically correct, but which was unpopular, personally disadvantageous, or risked damaging an important relationship. How did you approach the decision, and what did you learn from the experience?
Thank you very much for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. Describing the situation would be, I was appointed on a task force in 2021 on establishing the project outline in terms of how we are going to begin with institutionalizing what you call a pension-backed home loan project within the fund where I'm from. And essentially, we were a group of 5, and essentially what that project was about is to say that we've identified that there are quite a number of members in society who cannot afford homes, for example. And we wanted to come in as a fund to ensure that that problem is addressed from one angle or another. It had a robust and extensive customer and as well as stakeholder outreach, where you need to be dealing with different legs of stakeholders and also that are having different interests within this particular project. So initially, what was lawful about it was, in a sense, to say, what does the law say about home management, right? What does the law say about what the boundaries are in terms of even the percentage of giving to somebody to say, this is the amount, or rather the percentage of pension you are able to borrow in order for you to afford a home. That was the law aspect of it. Ethically, I would say that it needed to be done in a manner that is understood by all. It was supposed to be done in a manner that is properly communicated. It was done in a manner where we are communicating to especially the recipient of the initial decision, who is the member, to say, this is what you can do, these are the procedures, and this is how we made sure that we got to even this percentage. I'll get to the challenge, which was really emotional, as per also the question, to say that there were a number of challenges with the project, in a sense where, of course, the members were coming through our stakeholder engagements with them, where they just felt like the percentage is too small. How did you get to that number? But even if you give me that percentage, would I really be able to afford a home? If you think about it, we needed to extensively communicate to them to help them understand that it's one thing to have the access to your pension in order for you to ensure that it is for your house, and it is also another for you to have funding when you have reached retirement age, where you can actually go away and say, I have worked for this long and I have deserved my pension and I'm able to live a stress-free life. A life that I'm able to continue carrying on after having completed the employment period up until the age of 60. Personally, it was challenging in a sense where you would always be in a position where you feel for the next person, because you also understand the practical sense of what it is they are really saying. But how you respond to that is actually what matters, in a sense where you look at the bigger picture. You look at truly what's supposed to matter to the person and make sure that there is, in economics we call it equilibrium. You make sure that there is an equilibrium in terms of, this is what it is that's being offered, this is what you can do with what's being offered, and this is how you can balance the two, also thinking about the big picture and the long-term goals. My approach to to those challenges and even some of the win-win factors, where in a sense to say that communication should be key at every level and at every stage. However, when it comes to communication, there is a very important element to communication, and that is consistency. Because it's one thing to communicate today, and it's another thing to communicate today and some other time. So it needs to be consistent communication where different people at different levels and at different stages within the project are actually communicating the same thing, so that misinformation is totally done away with, and in order for us to ensure that we do away with the risk of misinforming the public and misinforming the members. What I have learned from the project is initially to say it's all about the people in anything. Initially to say that whatever it is that you do, be it a strategy, be it a project, it needs to be directly linked to how the person will feel the activities that you were busy doing and deciding upon are actually impactful in their lives. It needs to be felt, and the communication also thereof needs to be very simple. It needs to be understood by any average person on the street to say, this is what this organization is doing, and this is the impact, this is the reality of what it is that we are seeing as decisions and activities that they were tasked with regarding this particular subject matter.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You can hear me clearly?
I can.
Great. I'll have two questions for you, and I'll put the one question, you can respond, and then I'll put the second question.
All right.
Question is, which SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections do you consider most important for Namibia? And how can the Electoral Commission better align its practices with these standards?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. That would be the standards of the quality standards that have to do with integrity, ethics as well. In a sense, there where we say that when we comes to ensuring that there is a high level of integrity in any process, it allows for trust to be built between the recipient and also the lawmakers. In that sense, it would need to go hand in hand with the practice from the ECN, for example, to say that how we're going to align ourselves as a ECN, number one, is going to be in a manner which the integrity is extensively communicated so that it can run across and actually penetrate into the understanding of every person with that appreciation of how integrity is being practiced at the organization. It would also need to go with a matter which is close in terms of the democracy, right, which is the element of understanding what is free and what is also fair. Coming in and understanding again on top of that, how that environment is going to be fostered, right? To say that when it comes to having a free election, it means that members of society are able to go out there and cast a vote, for example, in a sense where nothing is required from them except wanting the overall and end results. And when it comes to the element of fairness, we tie that back to how the integrity is being measured and how the integrity is also being felt and also how integrity is being practiced. So that is my response, and I submit, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
The second question from my side. Now, what lessons should Namibia draw from the recent electoral observation mission reports on the conduct of the 27 November 2024 presidential and National Assembly elections? And what reform would you prioritize to address any adverse findings or recommendations in those reports?
All right. Right. Some of the lessons learned, and I will mention two in particular, of which later on I will tie them to the reforms on how I would address them. The first one would be the turnover of voters. That would be the first, initially in saying that we want to have to up those numbers when it comes to those that need to cast their votes, right? So that is the first one. And having said that, and the second item would be the logistical arrangements around it. And then I would now bring in a third one also that has to do with education of the civil society. Now, starting with education of the civil society would initially be to say that we want our youth, for example, to be in a position where they understand the why they need to vote. It's not just a matter of saying that we want to educate you and we want you to understand that these are the dates, this is when you have to go, this is where you have to go to, and this is where you draw your X. It goes beyond that, and it's more like peeling an onion and going a layer deeper to say that initially voting is supposed to be something that you practice in order for you to meet a certain state moving forward. And to put it in simple terms and also simple English would be to say, as an example, if somebody has a headache, right, and they are able to commit to standing in a queue for several hours, they would continue to stand in that queue because psychologically they know that they are going to meet a state of being in that future by the time they are at the end of the line when they get the medication or whatsoever. And what's motivating them to stand in that queue is a healthier them at the end of the day, seeing that there is an experience that's awaiting. So, and it's the same thing again when it comes to voter turnout, to say that we now understand what it is, we now understand what it is that we need to do. Of course, it needs to be re-emphasized as we continue to move along. However, we need to understand that there is a value proposition that would be required from the ECN to the public, in a sense to say that fine, I come out, I vote, and then what, initially? And that is the value proposition of, in the example of the person with a headache, to say, I'm going to commit to standing here because I know that I'm going to meet a future, I'm going to be in a future state where I feel better. That is the why. Now, it comes back again in understanding the why within the reasons why the youth needs to vote. They need to understand that there is a greater impact and essential understanding of that impact, what it is and how it impacts them at the end of the day. The thing about also again understanding this is how extensive that that education is to the youth. For example, some feel that they are not informed, some feel that they are informed, yet perhaps it's not coming in through enough. Hence, having said that, the communication needs to be effervescent. So that is the first lesson, the first and the second lesson learned in terms of how it is that or rather from the reports from the previous election, which is the voter turnaround, and then the second one being that logistical arrangement around that voter turnaround. The third would be from a legal point of view, in a sense to say that we did have disputes, right, concerning the elections and the results of the elections and the process of the election being questioned and the integrity and the transparency thereof. And these things are things that cannot be ignored, in a sense that what's really encouraging is the fact that these disputes are being brought forth. Is it a good thing that we have disputes that are being brought forth? absolutely, they need to be brought forth. And we also learned that when the disputes are being brought forth, they are actually going through a legal system where these disputes are being heard in court, and when they are being heard in court, they are actually being actioned upon, which is resulting to an initial court ruling that does come out and make sure that changes are made in order for us to improve future elections. And that is a good thing for a democratic country such as Namibia. The reforms for addressing and what I would do, for the first one, I would do an extensive, create an extensive communication strategy, because then information is key to have an educated society that understands the pros of voting, that understands the initial process and the initial system and the initial intent created for the electoral entity. And that would be for initially communicating that in a sense where they understand the reasons why they should be going out there and voting. And that can be done so that I don't just sound theoretical and rather practical, is in senses where we have quite a vast, a diverse number of, for example, public transport users, right? So, and it's really understanding how we can come up with strategies to make the PPP work in Namibia, where we have our public-private partnerships work for us, because the laws are there to help us work together. The opportunities are there to help us work together. But once we leverage on those opportunities, that's really the stepping point in how we are going to be moving a step further in what we want, in the Namibia that we want to see. Having a large proportion of people that are, let's say, for example, private public transport users, leveraging that and actually partnering with the taxi drivers or the minibus drivers and having them understand what it is that the ECN is trying to communicate. Now, of course, at this point you would think, yeah, but then the taxi driver would ask, what is it in for me? Like, if I have to continue this. And that's exactly what I'm saying about education, the appreciation. Because once something is done right, no matter who does it, when it succeeds, we all benefit from it. And that's what we need to sell to our people and to society at large, to say you are contributing to a cause. You're contributing to a cause that is going to promote change. You're contributing to a cause where you are going to feel it, whether you initially participate or not, but rather participate, and that is the encouragement. You speak to the taxi drivers. How many people on average use taxis? So many, right? You speak to and if we have to minus that out of saying we have public transport users, and then we also at the end of the day have private transport users, that proportion goes to partnering with service station owners and whatnot, because at some point they would be needing to fill up, and at some point you would be engaging with them directly or indirectly. That is one on the communication strategy. The other would be on making sure that we leveraging from the ever-changing environment concerning ICT and the digital transformation. It's changing our lives, whether we like it or not, whether we choose to engage or not. It's coming, it is here, and in one way or another, we have to engage with it. In one way or another, we make use of it, whether we know it or not, right? So that is another important element of saying, how can ICT work for us? Of course, considering the fact that there are threats within society that have to do with cybersecurity threats, and that goes back to saying, again, we need to be informed. How are we informed? We need to do research. How do you do research? You need to understand how it is that you need to do quality research. But in order for you to do quality research, you need to be educated enough for you to get that quality research, for you to do what you call now data mining. So going back to the point of initially saying that we need to ensure that we build those PPPs, it's again saying that having the ultimate understanding of what it's then we need to be doing is an extensive stakeholder engagement with key partners. Let's say, for example, there was a matter one day that was reported to say that we have so much incoming what do you call smartphones, right? And this is data that is sitting at NAMRA, for example. Partner with NAMRA, ask them what is the data, what is the percentage, because somebody is buying those cell phones. And if somebody is buying those cell phones, it means that those cell phones are being used somewhere. But how do we have them understand the value proposition of saying, now that you have a smartphone in your hand, you are able to use this smartphone for A, B, C, and D. For example, voting electronically in this case. Is it an easy thing to do? Perhaps maybe not an easy thing to do, but is it impossible? No, it's definitely possible, and it's something that we can get on and explore and initially begin to learn. And when it comes to learning, there's always this thing of having the fear to embark on new things because we're scared to fail. But it's not really a bad thing to say that we need to explore different avenues and alternatives in terms of how we want to make our electoral process efficient and better. So it's initially saying, how do we allow what we already have so that we can have that and leverage from it and ensure that we also have our youth understand that from what it is you have, there is also something that you are able to give back and participate in the initial notion of you contributing to a better Namibia.
Thank you. Thank you. We actually must also look at the time because you only have about 10 minutes.
All right.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Kapari.
Thank you. If appointed, what strategic reforms would you advocate over the next 5 years to strengthen the Electoral Commission's effectiveness, credibility, and resilience?
Thank you very much for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, and I will keep it short in the interest of time. The strategic reforms that I will do is that in terms of the effectiveness of the ECN would be starting with the people first, and these are the people of the ECN themselves. To say that we would want, one of the values of the ECN is excellence, but you cannot be an excellent institution if you do not have excellent employees. So making sure that we are going to invest in those employees in order for us to upskill them and give them the right skills and give them the right understanding of how to manage the Electoral Commission would be the first thing that I would be doing to ensure that we have an excellent ECN because it's backed by having excellent employees. That's one. The second would be the matter on M&E, which is monitoring and evaluation, not only at ECN level, but at a national level as well. Why? Because these are serious matters that affect real lives at the end of the day. Making sure that we have a robust monitoring and evaluation strategic process within the ECN would be key, because we learn from past mistakes, we learn and we improve what's currently happening within the state of affairs. So it's going to be a robust monitoring and evaluation strategy.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Institutional independence does not equate to operating in a vacuum. The Electoral Commission is accountable to the National Assembly, and its decisions may be subject to judicial scrutiny in the event of electoral disputes. How would you ensure that this accountability to Parliament and the courts strengthen rather than undermine the Commission's actual and perceived independence, neutrality, and non-partisanship?
Thank you very much for the
Thank
question.
you.
Through you, Madam Chair. So inherently the ECN is an institution that by what it is that it does, it already attracts criticism, right? And even when you come with the trends and the evolution of the ECN and the evolution of Namibia even thereof, you would see that there are a number of political parties and independent candidates that come forth for registration at every electoral phase. And it is this what would make the ECN really of national interest to many stakeholders, because the more political parties and independent candidates that you have, the more expectation that you have from the public, because people are now, after especially having voted, are in a situation where they are expectant and they are eager to know what is happening, where does my political party lie, and this is very important. And the more you have that expectation from the public, the more you have the scrutiny also. But it's important again to be able to be open to that scrutiny, so you learn moving forward. How am I going to make sure that the ECN remains accountable to the National Assembly? It's in a state where, especially when it comes to conflict management and dispute resolution, to present all the facts, firstly, in terms of having heard and having understood and having practiced what we call impartiality, and involving everybody to participate in contributing what the effects are to this dispute, and equally learning and understanding both parties at the same time. That accountability would need to be coming from that integrity perspective, and it also needs to be coming from that impartiality perspective, and more so coming with the initial elaboration and discipline that we are in a position to amend the laws, to help communicate what practical amendments are possible, and in order for us to also jump on the bandwagon, in order for us to participate in those changed amendments.
Thank you. Mr. Kavara, do you have?
The next question is from me? Okay. My next question is, in your view, what would be the single greatest possible strategic threat that to Namibia's electoral democracy? And what specific preventative strategies should the ECN implement to mitigate such threat? And how would you measure whether those interventions were effective? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The biggest threat would be manipulation of data. The manipulation of data in terms of the votes that were casted by the voters. That is the single most important threat. And how would I, for example, ensure that that threat is mitigated? It would be through transparency of vote counts, where at every single time that votes are being counted, there is a high level of transparency, so that not only the public, but also the political parties, representatives, and anybody else, and any stakeholders is able to truly see and understand the procedures that have to do with vote counting and the transparency of it, therefore. So that would be a strategy that would be need to put in place, and that would be needed to be communicated and understood. How would I measure whether that has worked? Is basically hearing from the process again, or rather hearing from the participants of the process to say, how do you feel about the process that you have just witnessed? Do you feel that there was transparency within voting, vote counting? And also, what other mitigations are we able to put in place for that matter? And re-look at those contributions and see whether they are speaking to what it is that we were measuring, or whether they are deriving away from what it is that we were measuring. So to answer in short, the biggest threat would be vote manipulation of the results, and how I would mitigate that is through high levels of transparency, where I get the interested people, stakeholders, to be present and to witness that process as it unfolds. And then how I would measure that is in order for us to see whether the final outcome is satisfactory to those who were of interest in the process. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My next question is, what lessons should the Commission draw from the operational challenges experienced during the last elections, and how would you improve preparedness for future elections?
The lessons learned were initially the perception, firstly, of how there's perhaps a lack of impartiality in the process, to say that no, but why is one party being treated different from the other, for example? That is one. They say that yes, perception is perception, but again, perception cannot be ignored, especially for a country like ours. We need to look at the factors that are contributing to some of these, which have a very extensive relationship with also how information is communicated. That is one. And this perception, rather, was brought about by the time communication, important and critical communication, was communicated to the public by the ECN. So it's one thing to communicate, but it's another thing to communicate timely. There are certain information that you can only communicate within a certain phase. And after that phase, people have already said what it is they have said. The media has already said what it has said. Everybody else is now in a situation where they are speculating, and you don't want that. Why? Because we can prevent that. It's preventative by making sure that when you communicate timely, you communicate effectively, you communicate in single language, in simple language, and you communicate the same. What one polling station is communicating should be what the next polling station is communicating, and also overall, the message should be the same, and it should be clear for an average man on the street to be able to understand what is being communicated. How can we prepare for the next round of elections? We can prepare by starting today and making sure that we begin with already how we are going to be preparing for the next round of election in 2029. Thank you.
Mr. Kavari.
Yeah, next question.
But we are just extending a few minutes because you actually extend them.
All right.
45 minutes.
All right.
Let's really be very precise.
All right.
Okay.
Why do you think stakeholder engagement is important? And strategically, what will you do to ensure it is implemented?
Stakeholder engagement is important because you would want to build relations and collaborate with different people in different groups, different entities, and the government at large. That is the importance. The short answer to that question is collaboration. We cannot exist as a single entity. There has to be a high level of collaboration from other entities in order for the Namibian agenda in terms of free and fair election in a democratic Namibia is successful. And what it is that I would do to ensure that there is an extensive stakeholder engagement is to build partnerships. Have a stakeholder map your stakeholders, who is important, who has high level of interest, how do we engage with the different stakeholders, and at what times do we engage with the stakeholders. I submit, Madam Chair.
Yeah, sorry, my second part.
Yes.
How would you ensure inclusivity for the youth, the women, and persons with disabilities in the electoral process?
Right. how I would ensure inclusivity is to have targeted messaging to this different groups of people, and in order for them to know that it is them that are being targeted, in order for them to come forth and actually cast their votes within the electoral process. That would be one, to ensure that the communication to these people is targeted and that it is them that's being targeted in order for them to be coming forth to cast their votes. The second is, I would, when they finally come forth, which they will, is to say that I would engage them further, right? Because now you have them, they're here, and also ask them what it is that we can also improve from an institution's point of view in order for us to make their experience better moving forward and learn from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haraama. Say Haraama.
Yeah.
Yes. Is there anything you want to ask the selection committee?
I am okay. Thank you very much. I'm just really grateful. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you. Can we have the next candidate? The name is Patricia Martina Ileka. Miss Patricia Ileka. Is it Ileka? No. Patricia Martina Ileka. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct.
So you're welcome to this interview. My name is Lidvina Shapwa, and I'm the chairperson of this interview today. I represent the Public Service Commission of Namibia, and I will introduce the panels to you now. On my immediate right is Mr. Willem van Grunen from the Law Society, and on the next to him is Ms. Susan Hinda from the High Court of Namibia, and then I have on my left Ms. Biekes from the NQA, and also Mr. Kabari from the Board of Auditors and Accountants. So, and next to him is the Secretary to the National Assembly, Ms. Esther Kapanda. She is here as a secretary to this interview today. So you're welcome, and feel free, feel comfortable. We only have 45 minutes per candidate to answer all the questions, and please just feel comfortable and be precise. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I will ask you the first question, which has got two parts. Part one says, can you address the committee of your knowledge and understanding of the legal framework under which the ECN operates and the statutory role of the Electoral Commissioners?
Okay, thank you for that question. You asked about the can you please repeat the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you address the committee of your knowledge and understanding of the legal framework under which the ECN operates and the statutory role of the Electoral Commissioners?
Thank you. The legal framework of the ECN, definitely it has two parts. First is the Namibian Constitution, which is a supreme law of our country, which ensure democracy. If you look at Article 93B, it ensures the equality and democracy. So the principles are based on democracy and equality. It must ensure, and the ECN is governed under the principles of the Constitution of Namibia to ensure free and fair elections, and to ensure that each Namibian citizen have the freedom to express themselves and cast their vote. So that is the one piece of legislation that compel, the ECN. And then the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission ensures that under the Electoral Act number 5 of 2014, ensures the freedom of elections. It ensures that the commissioners are impartial, they are independent, they are not involved in any biased decisions, and they are actually data-driven. And my knowledge, I'm an information professional governance person. I've started my studies long ago where I'm involved in protecting of data and the privacy of our Namibian citizens. I'm very passionate, taking my experience in consideration, that data must be protected and all citizens must have a free and fair election. So the Electoral Act also indicates that, the public, the citizens need to trust and have confidence in the public, in the Electoral Commission and in the commissions, that everything is done independent, partially, with integrity, transparency, and every citizen within Namibia have the right to vote with any interference from any political party. That is what's guiding the ECN. Thank you.
Thank you. My second part of the question is, in your view, what is the constitutional purpose of the Electoral Commission, and what are the greatest threats to electoral legitimacy in modern democracies?
Can you repeat the question?
In your view,
yes.
What is the constitutional purpose of the Electoral Commission, and what are the greatest threats? Oh, sorry, the mic is off. Okay, sorry. The second question, in your view, what is the constitutional purpose of the Electoral Commission, and what are the greatest threats to electoral legitimacy in modern democracies?
You are asking, in my view, what is the purpose of the Electoral Commission? The purpose of the Electoral Commission. And then in my view, the purpose of the Electoral Commission, especially the commissions, is having a very, very critical role to play, because they are the bridge between the political parties, social societies, and other institutions. They need to create the confidence, have the confidence to trust, because currently we all know that the public do not trust the Electoral Commission at all. So it is very important that the Electoral Commission is independent, trustworthy, act with integrity, and be in the rule of law. So it's very critical, in my view, that the Electoral Commission is trustworthy, they have integrity, they are transparent, and they ensure that elections are done in a free and fair country. They are the bridge between political parties and the public and the society, and they need to make sure that everyone is comfortable. When I walk into that polling station, I'm comfortable that I'm protected by the Constitution of Namibia to cast my vote and to make sure that every citizen. I'm also thinking about, the polling stations. So the Electoral Commission must make sure that the polling stations are easy accessible, be inclusive of the marginalized people, make sure that voter education and civic education is done in all the various languages. So it's very key. And we also know that our Namibians don't like to read. We have the common, we just follow what we see and what we hear from other people. So we need to create the culture of reading in our country. Even having, simple, sometimes when we write material, in my view, when we write material for high level. We forget about the marginalized, because Namibia is having a rate of illiterate people, so we need to be inclusive of all of them to get them in board. That is the role of the commission, of the ENC. They need to make sure that everything is on board. Civic education is rolled over. And what I've also noticed in my view, that when election starts, the Electoral Commission can do so much, but they don't do that much because they only start being active and aggressive when it's time for elections. But from there on, they are very silent, that you even at times start to wonder what is happening. And so it's very important we start early, educate our people, go into the rural areas. And we've also noticed that from the rural areas, we have urbanization. Most people are coming from the rural areas to the cities for education and for better conditions. So that is also another challenge that we need to look on. And then you will also see, we must also hold political parties accountable for their promises, because that's where the lack and the trust also go for political parties. And that's where the low turn-up rate also happen. It's because political parties are not accountable for the promises that they are making. And there's a lot of threats when it comes to elections, in my view. We have a lot of young people. They are advocating out there, personal advocates out there, and they have social movements. They have movements, and they listen and look up to this social movement and their advocacy movement. So they're not involved. So that can create threats, misinformation, distrust, and wrong information, because if you put wrong information out there in the media, then you must know young people will not come and vote, because young people want their voices to be heard. So in my view, it's very crucial that the young people, marginalized people, disabled people, are all inclusive when it comes to voting, because that can cause a threat. And if we are talking about digitalization, young people in 1 second, they want to vote. They don't want to stand in long queues. I will tell you about my experience when I had to go and vote. When I walked into the polling station, the light was dim, it was not clear, you could not actually see. That's why I also applied to make a difference, so that you can look at our polling stations, our situation where the polling stations are, to ensure that each person has the opportunity to vote, and it's comfortable to vote. We don't even have water facilities. We don't even have disabled facilities. And I was even thinking about voice recognition. When somebody votes and is blind, he needs to be led by somebody else. That's already a threat. That's why political parties come and say, we are not sure that the election officer actually assisted the participant to vote. So that's also one of the key threats that we are also having. And also to make sure that our young people is on board and they come and vote, to look at I-voting. I was reading an article about Estonia. Estonia is I-voting for almost 15 years. And they started with the I-voting before the cybersecurity and the hacks. So I totally believe that that can also happen, and that can also happen in our country. We can perhaps have twofold votes for the young people and then also for the elderly people, because the elderly people are not so digital savvy as the young people. Yeah, that's in my view the threats that we are experiencing in our country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. My first question is, the electoral commissioners are required to act independently, impartially, without fear, favor, or prejudice. Can you describe a situation in your professional life where you were required to make a decision that was lawful and ethically correct, but which was unpopular, personally disadvantageous, and risked damaging important relationships? How did you approach the decision, and what did you learn from this experience?
Can you repeat, please?
Yes. Electoral commissioners are required to act independently, impartially, without fear, favor, or prejudice. Can you describe a situation in your professional life where you were required to make a decision that was lawful and ethically correct, but which was unpopular, personally disadvantageous, or risked damaging an important relationship. How did you approach the decision, and what did you learn from the experience?
Thank you for the question. As an information governance profession, I deal with data. I deal with data, which is very, very, very confidential. I will give you an example where I had to decide, am I going to give this information or not? Is it lawful or not? Will it break the relationship? Will I not be popular? And then, is it ethical? Because we need to look at those various steps. So when you have to give information, we all know that employee information is very, very confidential, and it's having an impact on that information. So when you are asked to provide information, you make sure that when you provide this information, or when you are asked to destroy information, because sometimes you are asked to destroy information, and you know this information is of critical value to the Namibian nation, because you know when you have information within the institution, after a few years, this information needs to be transferred to the National Archives, and it needs to be made public to the National Archives. You will come in a situation where you are asked to destroy information without following the correct structures, because there are correct structures to destroy information. So what I did, I would rather, go to the person or the institution, say this information is being appraised as vital for the whole country, Namibian nation, because you are serving the nation in any capacity where I was or where I am. So you are serving so you make sure that even if you are going to damage your relationship, you make sure that you inform your auditors, your chief risk compliance in your institution. And then we also have the whistleblower lines in our institutions, but you make sure that this vital information, which is very, very important for our cultural heritage, is not destroyed. So you inform and you work within the parameters of the legislations to make sure that nothing is destroyed and the risk is also eliminated by destroying this information.
Thank you. That's it from me now.
Thank you. Yes.
Good afternoon. You can hear me clearly?
Yes, yes, yes.
Perfect. From my side, the panel wants to know which SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections do you consider most important for Namibia? And how can the Electoral Commission better align its practices with these standards?
How we get better? The last part?
Align these practices. So I'll just repeat again. So which SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections do you consider most important for Namibia, and how can the Electoral Commission better align its practices with these standards of these SADC principles and guidelines?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, Namibia was actually one of the first countries in Africa that started with online machine, EFA machines voting. We were the first country which we actually put a mark on our country, and it's commemorable. However, there are various SADC principles that I think that Namibia can adopt. For instance, the independency and the impartially, naturally, being natural and unbiased. And unbiased principles we can really, because the aim is for us to remove and to not to go to the electoral court, is to remove irregularities, because we know constantly in Namibia that there's always irregularities pre-elections and during the election process. And so these are the principles that we can actually adopt, and then also have transparent, free and fair. And also what I also believe is training and voter education. And sometimes you can also see that we don't have violence, although sometimes we have a little bit of violence in our election process. And it's also some of the principles that we can adopt. And principles that in other SADC countries not necessarily works for Namibian country, because we are very small. And we are very, very peaceful country in Namibia. So we can also adopt, the issue of violence, but we can also adopt the principle of being user-friendly to our voters. Because when voters are in a queue, we don't even provide water for them. We don't have ablution facilities for them. So that is also the principles that we are having that other SADC countries can also adopt to. So I think there's the independency, there's the partially, there's the training, civic training, and then the non-bias that we can also, and we are also very democratic in Namibia that we can also, other SADC countries can also learn from us. So I think the independency and the partially and the transparency and peaceful is one of the characters that we can improve in Namibia and adopt from the other countries, from the other SADC countries. Thank you.
Thank you. And then another question from myself. What lessons should Namibia draw from the recent electoral observation mission reports on the conduct of the 27 November 2024 presidential and National Assembly elections? And what reforms would you prioritize to address any of the adverse findings or the recommendations that were made by these observation missions?
Thank you for the question. We all know that we had a few challenges in those specific elections. And we also have challenges with the ballot papers finishing up in various towns. We also had issues with the polling stations, which are not in conducive circumstances, in conducive areas. So what the Electoral Commission can improve on is to ensure, use the NSA to have data-driven statistics, to ensure that we know who stays where. Is our rural area, how many people is in our rural areas, how many people are in our suburbs, so that we can ensure that we have enough ballot papers. Look at our polling stations, because currently our polling stations are not that much, I don't want to use the word nice, but they are not so much conducive to our voters, and they are also not, disabled people can't reach the ballot papers. They can't reach the polling stations. And our ballot papers are, when you go inside and you have to vote, some people don't even understand what they must vote for, how they must vote for, and how they must do it. And then also what we can also do is train our soft skills, emotional intelligence for our men in uniform and our election officers. Because election officers will sometimes come and look at you, and then they will bring their families to the front, and then the families must vote. So there's a lot that you can actually do to improve and to make elections a lifetime experience. And you will also realize that social media is there. The first 2 hours of voting is very critical. Very, very critical. There will be 3 or 4 young people in the queue, and they will already tell the others, no, the queues are long. We cannot vote here. People have to drive out. So I think that we really need to, if you look at the report, we really need to improve on our polling stations. We really need to improve on our voter and civic education. We really need to improve on our emotional intelligence training and our medical assistance on the site, because some people are hungry. There's not such even a thing like basic water that we are providing. And then the elderly people, the young people are in the queues forever. And then elderly people come, they go and vote first. And that is also feel the youth disgruntled. So we need to ensure that we have a different queues for the young people, for the old people, ensure that our disabled people. I was thinking about the person with no limbs. Do we even cater for somebody with no limbs on how to vote? Speech recognition for a blind person, so that you can actually record that, and then the person in the political party is comfortable that this person actually choose to vote for that specific company, for that specific for the specific party, because your vote is having an impact on the whole nation. So I think that there's really a lot that we can learn and that we can improve from those for the report of that specific elections. Thank you.
Next question. If appointed, what strategic reforms would you advocate over the next 5 years to strengthen the Electoral Commission's effectiveness, credibility, and resilience?
Thank you so much for the question. Sure, there's actually a lot. Yeah, what I want to improve. I'm a mother with young boys in my house, and they are not so eager to go and vote. So we really need to look at our young people. We really need to look at how do we engage with them. Like I previously said, we only start to do election campaigns when we are moving towards the elections. So we need to make sure, engage with various institutions, even at a high school level, to inform the high school child from grade 8 up to grade 12, the impact of making your voice heard, because we know Namibia is a democratic country and everyone's voice needs to be heard. Everyone, and the impact of putting that cross and the change that you want to bring. You need to vote and you need to understand why are you voting. It is your constitutional right to vote. So we really need to empower our young people to vote. And we really need to explore digital platforms. Although digital platforms have a lot of challenges currently, we all know that. And we all know that the digital platforms can also create distrust. But we need to make sure that the digital platforms, we enhance digital platforms. Like I previously said, that Estonia is voting online. They have an e-voting system. But Namibia can also try. And if you make young people involved in the decision making, if you take a lot of young people, because they are very innovative, they are very, very, very innovative. They can actually come up with an app or something that you can just vote from the comfort of your house. And then if you look at, this is the young people. If you look at our elderly people are so used to being normal. They go in, they come and vote. We also need to educate them. We also need to educate them on electronic gadgets, although that they will, because sometimes they are so sick, they are in the hospitals, they need to walk to a polling station to go and walk. There are some people who are bed rest, they cannot vote. But if we open up to digital transformation and digital voting, we can also all cater for them. I'm thinking about the people in the rural areas. If the people in the rural areas have a near town, or there's an electronic gadget there, and they are trained to vote on this electronic gadget, they can also vote. So these are the type of improvements because the most important improvement that we need to do is to have a public trust. And it's not to make enemies with the political parties, because we are all in a democratic country and we all want one thing, and it's for change that we want in our country. So it's very, very important that we change the connotation of distrust in public, with the public. Trustworthy, have integrity, and be trustful and transparent, and ensure that everyone has a free and fair elections. So I will definitely look in our marginalized people. They are also cut out of all this equation of voting. So we also need to make sure that we include them. I've also read, and we know that NDP 6 and the SWAPO manifesto makes provision for everyone. All the manifestos are for everyone to have a free and fair election. So in it cater for free and fair for democracy. I'm also just thinking about the LGTB plus. They also feel excluded from all this, although it's not recognized in our Namibian constitution. They also feel that they're excluded, and they also don't go to the polling stations. So we also need to get them on board and make sure that they vote, because they are female and men of this Namibian country. So they also need to be involved in the election process, starting with education, starting with education and awareness, the importance of. So that's the things that I really will want to see and to change. And even training on our election officials, they are not emotional intelligence, because we know that we can come to a polling station and an official election official will be so rude to you that you want to walk out of that polling station. But it's because we don't invest in them. We don't invest in our men with the uniforms, the soldiers, because they were just taught in one way. But it's very important that we also invest in them to give them emotional intelligence training to ensure that elections are done smoothly and transparent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Beekers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Ileka, my question is, institutional independence does not equate to operating in a vacuum. The Electoral Commission is accountable to the National Assembly, and its decisions may be subject to judicial scrutiny in the event of electoral disputes. How would you ensure that this accountability to Parliament and the courts strengthen rather than undermine the Commission's actual and perceived independence, neutrality, and non-partisanship?
Disputes. When you reach disputes, and when you want to ensure that you are independent within this dispute situation, you need to make sure that you operate within the parameters of the law. That's the important thing. Listen calmly to this situation. Find the root cause of the problem. Give the opportunity to all people who feel disgranted during this process, and make sure that there is trust, because trust is very important. Currently, there is distrust within the political parties. That's why we end up into court pre-elections and then post and during the election process. So trust, communication, open communication, ensure that there's no misinformation out there. And then also, we also know that there are some newspapers that can cause sensation. And then because our communities in our Namibian nation don't read, so if you just read something, I will give you an example of what happened. My mother saw my face on the newspaper yesterday, and she just read ECN. And then she called me, she was asking me, why are you involved in the Lutheran Church now? Then I said, where did you see the Lutheran Church? It's because she saw ECN. And she's like 73, you understand? So that is education to our elderly people. And that can cause disputes. That simple thing can cause disputes and animosity among our people. So from our side, from the Commission, we need to make sure that we are trustworthy. We need to make sure that we have integrity, that we are independent, that we are impartial, and that we look at human rights, and to make sure that we are adhering and promote democracy within our country, and that we adhere to the Namibian Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hint.
Thank you, Chair. My next question is, in your view, what would be the single greatest possible strategic threat to Namibia's electoral democracy? And what specific preventative strategies should the ECN implement to mitigate such threats? And how would you measure whether those interventions were effective?
Can you please repeat the question very slowly?
Okay. In your view, what would you say, in your view, what would be the single greatest possible strategic threat to the Namibia's electoral democracy? And what specific preventative strategies should the ECN implement to mitigate such threat? And how would you measure whether those interventions were effective?
Thank you. The single threat that I think as an information professional, information governance professional, it's confidentiality. You know, currently our data protection law is still a bill. And I'm taking in consideration if we need to move to digital voting, if we need to move to digital voting. So our biggest threat is confidentiality, and then also public trust, misinformation, disinformation, disengagement. So confidentiality. You know, when you look at transparency and confidentiality, you still need, you need to think, you need to give information to the public at large, but you also need to protect their data, because data is very, very important and it's very crucial. We see what is happening to the banks. They're having cyber attacks. Data is not promoted. And you also see that a few institutions are also being hacked and data is put on the intranet. So the data of our citizens is very, very important and very crucial. So what I will do in that case, we will make sure that we put mitigating factors in place and mitigate the data threats when we go to electronic voting or paper-based voting. We need to ensure that the data of our citizens are protected. They are kept well. I was even asking myself, I wonder where is the election results from 1990? How is it kept? Do we have strong rooms? Is it kept according to the National Archives Act of 92? Although it's old, but can we refer back and go to the National Archives and actually have that data available? Do we have a database where we keep all our records? Is our records authentic? So it's very important that we need to have a data storehouse as a mitigating factor to keep our data and to ensure that the public, they can actually trust us with your ID number, because we are taking personnel, important private information from this, our citizens. So we need to put measures in place, and we need to help political parties also accountable for keeping the data very important. So the measures that we must put in place is to have data protection, to have data storage facilities where we keep the data and ensure that all these records, because it's of national importance to our country, is transferred in the correct procedural way to the National Archives to be kept and preserved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, what lessons should the Commission draw from the operational challenges experienced during the last elections, and how would you improve preparedness for future elections?
Thank you. Okay, operational challenges is quite very important for our citizens, very, very important. If you look at what I just mentioned, our polling stations, it's an operational thing that can definitely be improved. The location of our polling stations. I also know that, you know, there were some polling stations which were near rubbish bins. So it's also something that the Electoral Commission can improve on. And then a simple thing that like abolition facilities, people went to relieve themselves wherever they want to. So it's also an operational thing. And ensure that we have enough ballot papers at all the polling stations. At all the polling stations. When we look at different polling stations, or when we identify, because we definitely need to get statistics from the NAC or previous statistics from our own elections that we are having, and look at the at the polling stations, look at the mobile polling stations that we are using. Are we able to put abolition facilities there? And then also we need to put medical personnel there, also in the polling stations or near the polling stations, because the clinics are far, and we also know that we are challenged with medicine in our country, and we are also challenged with the unemployment youth in our country, and they really want to go and vote. They really do not want to come and go and sit there and stand for 2 or 3 hours. So there's a lot that we can do operationally. Selection of the people who are working, the election officers. We also can improve on that. Involve the youth, involve them in everything they do, involve the elderly people, and give more voter and civic education to our members. Because if we are able to improve our operational challenge, it's already, and we make the elections for a citizen or for a young person a lifetime experience. Because if you read the report, some young people will tell you, I just voted because my friend said that, I was only there in and out. That's why they go and vote. But if somebody say, no, I was standing there in the queues from the morning to the evening and I still didn't go and vote, that's also another problem. And I've also realized that because of those long queues in voting, some young people go and they consume alcohol and they don't even reach the polling stations. So when they come there, they are under the influence. The officer does not have emotional intelligence, and they are just chased away. And sometimes you will also see that when you reach the polling station, I've actually experienced that the people are having a T-shirt on of the Namibian country, of our country, and they are not allowed to do that. So it's simple, small operational things that the Electoral Commission can do to improve the circumstances surrounding voting, the polling station, the ballot papers, to make it so user-friendly that these young people who just turned the legitimate age of voting will have a lifetime experience. Say, no, I casted my vote in this democratic country, and I'm also part of the decision-making authority. And that's the experience when it comes to operational challenges that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kavari, once again.
Okay. Why do you think stakeholder engagement is important? And strategically, what would you do to ensure it is implemented? That's the first part.
Yeah, stakeholder engagement.
Why it is important? And strategically, what would you do to ensure it is implemented?
Just to know that you have about 7 minutes.
Okay, stakeholder engagement is very important because you need your stakeholder to make a success of your election process. So it's very, very important that we engage with our stakeholders, and these stakeholders are our law society, our social societies, our political parties, our citizens, young citizens, youth, our marginalized people. You need to include them, and it's very, very important that you have stakeholder plan and stakeholder engagement. So for the implementation of the stakeholder, I will ensure that before we implement the stakeholder plan that we are going to draft, I will ensure that we involve the youth in crafting of the stakeholder plan and the Namibian citizens, because they need to be engaged in all institutions, high schools, educational facilities, our universities. They need to be involved. And it's very important because that's how you get people and improve the turnover rate at the polling stations. So the stakeholders is very important, and it needs to have a strategy to implement them. And you can use various communication methods. You can use social media, how to implement it if it's on your stakeholder plan. You can use the youth to mobilize. We have activists that is also involved. You can get them on board, and you can make sure that the stakeholder plan is implemented through various platforms and engagement. You can even use your political parties to implement your stakeholder plan. Thank you.
Maybe the second part is, how would you ensure inclusivity for the youth, the women, and persons with disabilities in the electoral process?
Thank you. The youth is very close to my heart. Yeah, definitely we need the youth. We need to improve on the low turnover rate of the youth and persons with disabilities. Like I mentioned before, polling stations are not disabled friendly. We don't have ramps at our polling station. Some of the polling stations is such in rural areas that you cannot even walk there with a wheelchair, or if you don't have limbs. So we need to be inclusive of all our marginalized people and the youth. You must make them part of the electoral process. I was even thinking if the commission can have volunteers from these various categories, and include them in the election process. And they can even be used in the education, in the voter education. They can even be used. And Mr. Kavari, you were talking about the woman. Nowadays, it's the boy child that feels excluded from everything. Yeah, so we need to look at the boy child and the girl child, that they are involved in the election process, in our elderly, in our disabled people. I know that because of the affirmative action, most institutions are also now taking disabled people, enrolling them, and give them a job. And I think that the Electoral Commission can do the same to empower the women, the youth, and the disabled people, and the marginalized people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's what we wanted to discuss with you, unless you have a question to the committee.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a privilege to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the media, members of the public. We still continue with the interviews of identifying Electoral Commission commissioners. However, I would love to inform the public that the coverage on NBC1 has stopped from 1 o'clock, and the public can follow the proceedings on NBC2. Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Leonard. Please take your seat and make yourself comfortable.
Thank you very much.
Apology for waiting.
Not a problem at all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Leonard, Doctor. Oh, Dr. Leonard, my apologies. Dr. Leonard, I missed that part. As I said, welcome to this interview, of which you applied to become a member of the Electoral Commission of Namibia, of which you are already. We are going to have a discussion with you this afternoon about your application. Before I start, I would love to introduce the members of the committee to yourself. On my immediate right here, I have Willem van Groenen. He's a chairperson of the Council of Law Society in Namibia, and also a deputy chairperson of the selection committee. Next to him is Ms. Susan Hinda, who is the registrar of the High Court of Namibia. And on my left, far left, I have Mr. Vemunyengwa Kavari, who is representing the Public Accounts and Auditors Board. And also next to him is Ms. Harmony Biekas, who is a director of Namibia Qualification Authority. And next to Mr. Kavari, at the end of the table, is Ms. Esther Kapanda, who is the secretary to the National Assembly and also a secretary for these interviews. You're welcome and feel free.
Thank you very much.
I'll start with my first question, which has got two parts. The first part is, can you address the committee of your knowledge and understanding of the legal framework under which the ECN operates and the statutory role of the electoral commissioners? B, in your view, what is the constitutional purpose of Electoral Commission, and what are the greatest threats to electoral legitimacy in modern democracies? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the questions. The first one is on the legal framework and the role of the commissioners. So the Electoral Commission of Namibia, it's a body set up through the Constitution and the exclusive body mandated to organize, direct, supervise, manage, and control the conduct of elections and referenda in the Republic of Namibia. And this needs to be done in a free, fair, and impartial way, and to be undertaken without any fear and impartiality of conducting this, the fear and prejudice, in conducting the elections. So that is basically the Electoral Commission, and then it is governed by the Electoral Act 5 of 2014 that really outlines from how the commission should be established, the management of the commission, the commission, the duties and functions of the commission, how elections should be conducted, and all of that is within the legal framework that governs the ECN, which is the Electoral Act 5 of 2014. So the role of the commissioners basically is to ensure that the mandate of the commission is undertaken, which is to organize, direct, supervise, manage, and control elections. And the task among those, it's really at operational level. We oversee the registration of voters, we maintain the voters' roll, civic and voter education, it's among those that needs to be undertaken by the commission. The ensuring political party compliance amongst the aspects. We have, when we have elections, we receive election observers from across the globe, and that process also needs to be managed under the role of the commissioners. But the main really is to organize the conduct of elections. So there are internal processes that also needs to be overseen by the commission in terms of the overall management of the commission operations and activities. And then there are what I would refer to as the project type of activity, which is the conduct of elections, which happens after every 5 years, that also needs to be supervised and undertaken by the commissioners. So coming to the second question, the constitutional purpose of, sorry, I missed the constitutional purpose of?
The B of the question says, in your view, what is the constitutional purpose? Sorry. In your view, what is the constitutional purpose of the Electoral Commission, and what are the greatest threats to electoral legitimacy in modern democracies?
The constitutional purpose I've already somehow alluded to. It's that we are the exclusive, ECN is the exclusive body to organize, direct, supervise, and coordinate, control the conduct of elections and referenda. There is no other body in Namibia that can do that. So that is the constitutional purpose of the ECN as an entity. The threats to the legitimacy, electoral legitimacy right now is we have to really ensure that the electorate understands the importance of participation in elections, what it means for democracy, for individuals to participate in elections, and that really comes through education. We have over the years seen the participation in the Presidential National Assembly elections slightly high. When it comes to regional council and local authority elections, the participation would be lower. It's perhaps not as understanding as the electorate what is the importance of these elections. And yeah, and if people do not participate, we would not have a sound democracy. And through participation as ECN, we also need to instill that confidence in the electorate for us to conduct impartial, fair, peaceful elections for everybody to want to participate. And another threat that is not just for Namibia, but a global threat is the misinformation and disinformation that also comes around when it is time for elections. With the advent of artificial intelligence, any type of information goes out there, and many a times the electorate does not know how to differentiate between fake news and real news. And that, I see, becomes a threat to participation in elections too, and at the end, our electoral legitimacy. With the advent of artificial intelligence, social media and such, even before results are announced, they are floating around and people make their own analysis, and it becomes really a challenge onto ECN, a challenge that ECN needs to take up to ensure that timely the dissemination of results and such to counter this potential threat that could then threaten the legitimacy of this process.
Thank you. I omit to inform you that you are required to answer all the questions within 45 minutes, so let's proceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just before I move into my question, I've been advised that you are perhaps a bit far from your mic.
Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So, my question is, the electoral commissioners are required to act independently, impartially, without fear, favor, or prejudice. Can you describe a situation in your professional life where you were required to make a decision that was lawful and ethically correct, but which was unpopular, personally disadvantageous, or risked damaging a relationship? How did you approach the decision, and what did you learn from the experience?
Yeah, I should perhaps mention that, as you might have seen from my CV and qualifications, I'm a social worker by training, by profession, and currently a social work academic. And social work as a field, we know it's one that is governed by ethics. We face ethical dilemmas on a day-to-day basis because amongst the things that we have to adhere to, it's confidentiality. And confidentiality at times at the cost of somebody else. And that's where the ethical dilemmas could at times come in. So coming back to the question of in my professional life, I have, reflecting on social work once again, I have been faced as a social work during my years as a social work practitioner with many situations whereby in a confidential setting, information would be shared. And the person in this counseling session would say, you are not going to tell anyone else about this. This is, for example, a case that I can remember, a couple that is married. And whatever I'm being told here, was being told, has a bearing on the spouse. So the only thing I could do is to really talk to the client, the person telling me what the concern was, to say and make the person understand what are the implications of not telling the spouse about the situation that they are facing. And in this particular case, there is a threat in the other person's life. And explain the concept of shared confidentiality, that at some point, I also have an obligation to protect life of the next person. So, but that conversation must first happen with the person who divulged the information to me. So it's communication and making the person understand. It's not an easy position that one is in or would be in, but it needs to happen, that conversation, open communication of this unpleasant situation needs to happen, and also make the person understand that I have an obligation to tell whether you would want it or not, because that is expected of me in my professional capacity.
Thank you. That's it from me for now.
Afternoon, Doctor. You can hear me?
Yeah,
Clear?
clear.
I'll ask two questions. I'll pose the first question, allow you to answer, and then pose the second question. The first question is, which the selection committee wants to know, is which SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections do you consider most important for Namibia, and how can the Electoral Commission better align its practices with these standards?
Oh, that is it. All right, the SADC principles that we currently are using, it's the PEMO. What does the PEMO stand for? But it's the abbreviation that we mostly use. I unfortunately cannot recall what the PEMO stands for, but it really just provides guidance in terms of how, as SADC countries, we should be conducting elections so that there is a kind of uniformity in terms of how we are conducting elections, from preparations to the actual undertaking, observer missions, and all of that is contained within the PEMO. Namibia, we are the ECN in particular, it's a member of the Electoral Commission's Forum of SADC, of the SADC region, ECF SADC, we call it by abbreviation. That also, it's almost like a body of all electoral management bodies within the region, and we assist each other in terms of strengthening our electoral processes. Assistance in the sense that we are frank in terms of things and areas that needs improvement, but more on a very cordial, brother, sisterly manner, but also areas where we are doing well. It's being emphasized. So we are really, as members of this forum, on the SADC platform as well as the ECF SADC, we try to align our processes and whatever we do with those frameworks. When we have elections, we invite members from within the ECF SADC community, from SADC as an organ as well, and we really appreciate their feedback. The observer mission reports, now that we are past our election, in the post-election phase, we go through that, we assess, and we try to strengthen and improve on our processes, and that's what we do as part of the efforts to align our electoral processes to the existing frameworks within the region, particularly the PEMO and the ECF SADC guidelines. And yeah, that is really what we are doing as members to those organizations, and we value their input. And as much as we are a sovereign state and nation, there are areas that we can learn from others, and there are obviously areas that are more special and particular to our context that we would say, we hear you, but this may perhaps not be relevant and applicable within the current context that we operate.
Speaking of the electoral observation missions, what lessons should Namibia draw from the recent electoral observation mission reports on the conduct of the 27 November 2024 presidential and National Assembly elections? And what reforms would you prioritize to address any of those adverse findings or those recommendations in those reports?
Okay. The question is on the adverse findings, but there were also very good things that we are applauded for, but I will not get into that. Let me focus on the adverse. The first, as we all know, it's the long queues that we experienced in the 2024 elections. What the election observers in fact highlighted, and what we also know of as ECN, is this Namibia becoming one constituency becomes a challenge, a logistical challenge, because you using a paper-based election it's very difficult to predict how many people would be at which polling station, as much as we make contingency planning thereof based on the voters register and such, how many people have registered where. But we have seen in the last election what some observers mentioned is that, what was the word that they've used? Polling station shopping or hopping, that people would call, where are the queues shorter? And CAAs, for example, we know we don't have so many registered members in CAAs, but many people went to CAAs to register because, oh, the queues are longer here and such. So it's one of those that were mentioned that we perhaps need to think of a better way of doing that. What happens within the region is because we have the privilege of also observing other elections. It's that people register or within their particular constituency or a polling station. So in terms of planning, it is easier to know that X number of people have registered. It is expected that X number of persons would be voting at that particular polling station. But with us, you register in Windhoek, you can even vote in a different town. That is, the long queues was one of those. The long queues, what was the other? We over the years, we have been the Observer Missions report spoke about strengthening relationship with stakeholders, political parties and such. We are really working on that. We are trying our utmost best, and we have been, as part of our planning, communicating, having regular updates with political parties, seeking input and such from them. But there is always areas for improvement. Another aspect was the issue around voter education. From the observation of some of the electoral observers were that we need to improve on that, especially in areas that are a bit remote. We are taking cognizance of that, but then we also say voter education, civic and voter education should be a partnership. ECN would never be able to do that alone. And this calls for partnership from various stakeholders. And we could also engage into perhaps going in agreements with NGOs and such to assist in this very important aspect of civic and voter education. We spoke about the potential threat, and education is really what is needed for people to understand the importance of participating in elections. Youth, we are a youthful nation. We have to also find a way of doing things perhaps differently that could be appealing to the youth, because they would not want to stand in queues for very long hours and such. We need to look at innovative ways of how to conduct elections. Those are all challenges that are upon the institution, and which is also highlighted. But again, globally, it is also the trend that younger people do not always participate in elections, especially the regional and local authority elections. We had also, that is not 2024, but even with 2025, perhaps a possibility of Namibia thinking of harmonizing its elections, knowing that in one, the Presidential National Assembly elections participation seems to be slightly higher. With the Regional Council, local authority elections, slightly harmonizing would be cost effective. Logistically, people would, we plan once. And what is the word? Voter apathy. You go there once after 5 years and you elect for all the different types of participate in the different type of elections that we would want people to participate in. So those are some of the lessons that we are learning and feedback that we are getting from the observers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kavari.
If you are appointed, what strategic reforms would you advocate over the next 5 years to strengthen the Electoral Commission's effectiveness, credibility, and resilience?
All right. Strategic reforms. Thank you for that question. We are, in fact, already working on that. It's just something that we perhaps need to strengthen. It's really to decentralize our services so that it is not just Windhoek-based. The starting that we have done is that we have set up regional offices in all 14 regions. Going forward, it's really to strengthen that, because the Act talks about continuous registration of voters, which we currently don't do. After every 10 years, we know we discard our voters' roll and then we start the process of registration all over, which is also a costly exercise. If we are having services that are decentralized, then the continuous registration of voters would be happening. Whoever turns 18, who obtains a voter's card, do not have to wait for a period before a by-election or a national election, or after 10 years when we have to start the voters' roll all over to register, then that could happen continuously. So that is one of the strategic aspects that we would be looking at. As an entity, we also would want to have evidence-based electoral process. And how do we do that? Is to strengthen our research efforts. It's also in our current strategic plan, we have not really done great strides into that. Moving forward, it's really something that we have to think about, because how do we know that what we are doing is the right thing if we don't do research? And research not only with the usual stakeholders, which are our political parties, the organizations, associations, but the general public, so that they could also tell us their views in terms of how differently we could do things. Again, I'm again linking it to voter apathy that we are experiencing. Maybe through that, we could improve on our processes. Then we hear from the users of the service. So improving on the research and research output to inform our process. We have seen that in sister EMBs in the region. They are really investing in research. Some even have research units within the electoral management bodies. Others partnering with tertiary education institutions to undertake research, and that is something that we need to focus on. Voter education and civic education, it's a continuous activity which we also need to strengthen. And as I've mentioned earlier, partnerships, because ECN alone would not be able to do that. And partnerships, including political parties as well, and associations, organizations, what we have seen is that it's only mostly around the time of elections that our political parties and associations, organizations are really coming out strongly. But it should happen throughout. And civic education, it's around where we can also partner. So that is one of the strategic issues that we also need to look at. With the 2024 election, another issue, it's really our reputation and image that we have to work on as the ECN. We need to get the confidence back of the electorate into our processes. Because we have seen we had a 90% or close to 90% registration of voters for 2024. The turn-up was overwhelming. But perhaps what happened then might have led to a bit of a disappointment. It's upon us, as a matter of strategic importance, to rebuild our image and reputation, and more importantly, the confidence in our processes, that we are able to run this process of elections in the country.
Thank you. Ms. Beukes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Doctor. My question is, institutional independence does not equate to operating in a vacuum. The Electoral Commission is accountable to the National Assembly, and its decisions may be subject to judicial scrutiny in the event of electoral disputes. So now, with that in mind, how would you ensure that this accountability to Parliament and the courts strengthen rather than undermine the Commission's actual perceived independence, neutrality, and non-partisanship?
Excuse me. Independence, we know elections in Namibia are fully funded by Treasury by the state through Treasury. What we really mean by independence is that, and we have not had any interference in terms of how we should plan, conduct, and undertake the electoral processes. That ECN has always been doing independently, without any interference. We are currently using the Public Service Act when it comes to employment and such, and that's where we are not really operating almost like a government entity or an agency. That's where we would want to maybe determine in terms of how our structure would be, how the remuneration packaging and such would be done, comparing and benchmarking with other EMBs within the region, so that it is, because there is no other ECN in Namibia, we only have this. And our benchmarking would come from the other entities within the region. So in terms of staffing, we are following the public service rules. When it comes to the HR policies, all of that is from the public service. And that's where perhaps the independence would become a challenge, because we need to follow. When it comes to recruitment, how many staff members would we need to have, in what position, what grading would they be at? And yeah, so that is where we would want to see our independence fully operationalized. And like we have said, we are busy with the process of decentralization and such, but that is also something within the Act that we must undertake. When it comes to electoral disputes, again, as a country, we have the three organs of state which operates independently from each other: the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. The legislation is very clear in terms of what needs to happen when there are legal disputes. It's the Commission's duty to try and prevent scenarios that would lead to legal disputes, or if it is to happen, to manage that and to find ways of resolving it in a peaceful and amicable way. And that is really, and where does legal disputes mostly come from? It's through the electoral processes, perhaps, that are not transparent, or where people, as part of the registration, maybe would say that we saw a non-Namibian who got registered there, and if there is no transparency in the processes, legal disputes could come up. What we do is we would have an electoral calendar prepared, published, shared with everyone, and that is a guideline, a transparent guideline that we follow in terms of our planning for elections from the start until the release of the results and so on. And then another, it's obviously the disputes around the results. But the law also makes provision, should there be legal disputes that we are not able to resolve, that we can take legal recourse. We have the electoral tribunal, and then we have the electoral courts, through which matters could be resolved. Accountability to Parliament. The Electoral Act says that our budget is to be tabled by the Speaker in Parliament, because we need, unfortunately, we are not MPs, we cannot do it ourselves. So it is tabled by them, and that is as far as the involvement of the National Assembly goes. We have to, after 6 months of the conduct of elections, prepare our post-electoral assessment reports and submit it to Parliament. They have to debate, and whatever happens in there, it is our, as ECN, that is our obligation as part of the compliance that we must adhere to. But in terms of the operations of the ECN, Parliament is not really compromising ECN's mandate in undertaking its activities. I'm not sure if I...
Thank you. My next question is, in your view, what would be the single greatest possible strategic threat to Namibia's electoral democracy, and what specific preventative strategies should the ECN implement to mitigate such threats, and how would you measure whether those interventions were effective?
The single greatest possible strategic threat to electoral democracy. That could possibly happen. We are talking about a possibility. Possibility, we have spoken about interference perhaps in terms of the conduct of our undertaking of the ECN mandate. That we are talking about possible. It's not that it is happening, because it's the single greatest possible threat. That would be a threat. If that is to happen, interference would be because if that is to happen, it really would tarnish the credibility and the reliability of our process, and by extension, the peace that we enjoy in the country, because elections can make or break a country. Wars have happened because of that. So how do we ensure that it would not happen? That's why we have legislation. We have the Electoral Act. It's 2014. We are currently looking at amending or reviewing it. We are involving various stakeholders, and we will continue consulting to make sure that this piece of legislation will talk to everyone, and everyone can see and have the confidence in what is contained therein. So that could be a way of preventing a possibility of our electoral processes being threatened. Number one, we really need to look at our legislation, and the legislative review should be consultative and involve a broad spectrum of people, and not just be done by a certain group of people. And we have our political party liaison PLC committee that we share almost every other reforms, amendments, anything that we are planning as an entity. So yes, the biggest threat would be that we may lose our credibility in the process, or the credibility in our elections, because it would really cost the country dearly. And we would try by all means to prevent that.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, what lessons should the Commission draw from the operational challenges experienced during the last elections, and how would you improve preparedness for future elections?
Yeah, I've mentioned to the issue of us becoming one constituency when it comes to presidential and National Assembly elections, that we are not able to predict who would be voting where. We have to find innovative ways. If we are to continue becoming one constituency, we need to find innovative ways of how to conduct elections. We had, how many years ago, we had introduced the electronic voting, e-voting, which were put on hold because of a lack of a verifiable paper trail. Maybe those could be amongst the innovations that we could look at in going forward to improve our processes, especially if we are not able to have people registered per polling station or polling venue or whatever it is to help us manage the logistics around our processes. The long queues, yes, that's also a lesson that we have drawn from the 2024. I'm sure you are making reference to the 2024 elections. In the 2025 elections, you might have seen things were different. We had more streams at the different polling stations as a way of lesson learned from 2024. We had more booths that people could cast their vote for. And as much as the turnout was a bit lower, we noticed that the lines for those who were there, it went quicker, it was faster. So it's all part of the lessons learned from the 2024 elections, that we need to have more streams for voting, more ballot booths where people can cast their votes. So another aspect is really, one can never overemphasize the importance of civic and voter education. We need to strengthen that. We still have spoiled ballot papers, which we don't understand, or it has to do with education, obviously. That's why I say we need to improve on our voter education, so that we make sure that when voters go in there, they know what to do and how to do it, to prevent the spoiled ballots. So voter education needs to be strengthened.
You almost depleted the 45 minutes, but we can allow you to go to the next question.
I'm back. First part of the question, why do you think stakeholder engagement is important? And strategically, what would you do to ensure it is implemented? That's the first part.
Okay. All right, stakeholder engagement, I think I've also made a reference to that earlier, that these processes that we are undertaking, elections, it's not for ECN. It's for the electorate. It's for our stakeholders, such as the political parties, associations, organizations, and voters at large. So without their involvement, how would we know that what we are doing is the right thing? So we need to get guidance from that also and work with them in tandem as we are planning these processes. And they are the users of the service. They are able to inform us in what works, what perhaps needs to be improved in this area. So we have to continue. We have established a PLC, a Public Political Party Liaison Committee Forum. We have to continue with that. There are areas for improvement around that. We would, going forward, also see how we can improve and strengthen on that. And like I had indicated earlier, also the research that we are having as a strategic issue to get the views of the public in general. That is also stakeholder engagement for us.
Okay, lastly, how would you ensure inclusivity for youth, women, and persons with disabilities in the electoral process?
For ECN, it's really just through legislation, but the political agents, those who are participating in the processes, ECN can unfortunately not dictate in terms of how this representation should be done. But we can, similarly to what we have in our Electoral Act when it comes to the representation of women, whereby the Electoral Act says a minimum should be 2 women. That could be amongst the aspects to be included in the amendments that we are looking at, but it's a process where we are engaging our stakeholders. If they are in support, we would have that included, because we are 70% of how many percent? Yeah, 70% young people in this country. We have to somehow find a way of ensuring their representation. As an institution, internally in our processes, we have our disability policy, whereby we make sure even for recruitment of election officials, there is a quota for women. We make sure that we have a quota for persons with disability. And as we know, our election officials are mostly unemployed youth. So as an institution, we are doing our part. In terms of the political participation and such, we would call upon our stakeholders to also ensure that, but we will see how we can, as part of the amendments, bring that on board.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Is there anything you want to ask the committee?
Not at this stage. Thank you very much.
We thank you very much for coming, and I think there will be somebody to usher out. Thank you. You too. Good afternoon once again to the members of the public and media. We have come to the conclusion of our interview today, and we thank you very much for informing the Namibians on what is happening at this interview, and we look forward to working with you in the future on these issues. Thank you.